Imagine this. Imagine that you're standing at the water cooler at work with your friend, and he invites you to his opening night production of Macbeth that Friday night. And inside of your head, suddenly, the cacophony of hate begins. Oh, God, I don't want to go to that. That's $35. Oh, and Shakespeare's so boring and stupid and boring and ugh. But seconds later, you crack a smile and say, yeah, sure, I think that would be great. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Sound familiar? I know this look because I've been on the other end of it hundreds of times in my career. Casual friends, acquaintances, family members, I myself have given the look a few times. And every time it happens, it makes me wonder, do arts matter? Does what I do for a living matter to anyone else besides me? Do theater and musical theater and writing and film and music and visual arts and dance, are they really perceived by the public at large to be a waste of our local and national resources? Should we just stop? Imagination is the ability of the mind to create mental scenes, objects, or events that don't exist. And it also allows us to recall memory, history through memory. I remember in 5th grade, Carrie Walls was giving up one of the 2 leads in the annual pageant, the annual Christmas pageant. And nobody else wanted it but me. Okay, that's a little bit of a lie. A few other people wanted it, but I begged him on the playground to give it to me, and I agreed that he could punch me in the stomach 2 times to fork it over. And he did, and it was totally worth it. This was my moment. I was going to star opposite Christine Schmidt, the resident 5th grade diva, in our annual Christmas pageant. We rehearsed twice a week for 2 months instead of having religion class. And I have to tell you that my heart soared every time we turned our backs on God for the theater. And finally, the night came. And they turned on the floodlights in the school lunchroom, and they assembled that plastic stage, and I climbed the stairs in my little mittens and my little scarf and my little hat, and my eyes met Christie's. And we crossed to center stage, and we reached into our pockets and pulled out a sheet of loose-leaf paper that we snapped open simultaneously to tell the story of how Jesus and Santa were best friends. Meanwhile, our proud parents were popping Polaroid flashes like paparazzi in our parochial school lunchroom. We did that. We made a piece of collaborative art. A parochial school in St. Louis, suburban Missouri, worked together to sing and to dance and to make a story and write dialogue together. And we were proud. Could you imagine a school without a school play? My grandmother, she told me most of my life that she felt like I was wasting my time. I never personally understood how using your imagination and creativity could be considered a waste of time or a life. Meanwhile, Grandma was hooked on the same soap opera for 40-plus years, right? So much so that when she started getting hooked on it, she was listening to it on the radio and daydreaming about these fictionalized characters that she didn't meet till years later when they moved to the TV. And if it wasn't that steamy 4 o'clock hour, my grandmother could be found reading every trashy romance novel that she could get her hands on. Would she have been the same woman without all that lust and wonder? I wonder. When I got to high school, I discovered the St. Thomas Aquinas Mercy Drama Club, led by Mr. Jim Grummick. Mr. Grummick took me and my fellow students to Chicago theater adventures, where I saw my first Arthur Miller play, All My Sons. Mr. Grummick took us to our high school theater festival, where we were allowed to act and perform with and for other students in the region. Mr. Grummick took us to the fabulous Fox Theater in St. Louis, Missouri, to experience our first Broadway musical. Mr. Grummick celebrated our creativity, our individuality, and our imaginations. Mr. Grummick is still my hero to this day. But computers are the only way to the future, right? Imagine, in 1987, the National Endowment for the Arts funded Andre Serrano, and he used that money, our tax dollars, to create a photograph called Immersion, better known as Piss Christ. Piss Christ was funded by our tax dollars, and it is a photograph that shows a statue of Jesus in a jar, submerged in Andre's urine. What did it even mean? What was this guy doing and thinking by putting Jesus in a jar in the 80s and peeing on him? It doesn't make me want to fund. But any Christian in the land could consider this sacrilege and say, no, I'm not doing this. But I say this to you. Likely, friends, the NEA funds more than you realize. An example. So, a $10,000 NEA grant was awarded to the Willowberry, Ohio Fine Arts Association to make a specialized music program for 4 counties that primarily were made up of migrant worker families. And this program was going to give music lessons one-on-one weekly to secondary and middle school kids and supply instruments and teachers and lessons and transportation and books and the whole kit and caboodle. $10,000 did that. And if $10,000 did that, can you imagine what the $43.6 million they allocated to 435 congressional districts that year did? But we should throw it all away, right? We should just shut it down because of one controversial photo from the 80s. One controversial photo that makes you think. One controversial photo that may make you angry. One controversial photo that should kill it for everybody. In 1999, I changed from student to teacher when I was hired by an independent arts high school in Chicago, Illinois, to teach a class and make art with kids in a specialized theater program. One class turned to 3 classes, and 3 classes turned to full-time, and then they fired me. And, and a year later, they called me back, and they invited me to be the department chair. And I was the department chair for 9 years. 9 years. I worked with kids and inspired hundreds of them to live out their artistic dreams. 9 years. And meanwhile, I myself was being artistically satisfied in the Chicago storefront theater movement, acting and directing and producing. But I guess that was all a waste, right? A waste of time, theirs and mine. In 2009, Sonoma Academy called, and they made me an offer I could not refuse. Come, live in California, live in wine country, and make art with our kids. Give us our first all-school musical in the history of the organization, and teach our kids to love and appreciate the arts for life. And I did. And it was great. I made some of the best friends I have in life today, like my friend Lori Glodowski, Broadway producer. I drank for real. I drank some of the best wine that there was ever to be drank in Sonoma County, California. And I hung out in the Castro, gay Mecca. I got to spend time in the Castro. I met hundreds of gay men who survived the HIV/AIDS crisis, a crisis that I only knew from being a teenager watching it on television in Middle America. Anyway, one day I was sitting at Harvey's, named after Harvey Milk, at the corner of 18th and Castro, and I was reading a magazine and eating a burger and watching my grinder explode. 0 feet away, 0 feet away, 0 feet away. And my heart was breaking because the article that I was reading told me that HIV rates in men 18 to 25 were soaring. That's the word that it used, soaring. And I didn't know what to do. But I got inspired. I wanted to educate. I wanted to activate. I wanted to advocate. And it took me 3 years of thinking, and it started that day when I was surrounded by the spirits of men who died in a plague to create a piece called the Gay Fantasia. The Gay Fantasia is a late-night immersive event that takes place in the middle of the night, moving from place to stage and telling the story of the last days of the Harvey Milk era and the first days of the HIV/AIDS crisis. The Gay Fantasia won the St Lou Fringe Festival in 2014, a festival that allows new art to thrive, that celebrates imagination. I've been told the gay Fantasia makes people weep. I've experienced the gay Fantasia make people laugh. I have seen it be most heartbreaking when, towards the end of the piece, the cast comes to the audience and pulls the men out of the room and escorts them out, leaving obvious holes where humans used to live. History retold through immersion. Empty audience seats. Stolen members. Just like a generation of men stolen by a plague. But does anybody care? Does it matter? Ironically, that is exactly the question that those men in the 80s and 90s were asking. Check this out. Leni Sachs, the survivor and the translator. Leni Sachs, my teacher, my mentor, my friend. Leni Sachs' work first was produced in a garage in New York. This moment is a woman standing on a wire frame bed, running in place, holding a suitcase with her hand extended forward, running, turning back and forth, making high-pitched sounds. So what? I mean, can't you find any 3-year-old across the land doing this in their bedroom on a daily basis? But through the power of our imagination, you can now know that this moment is about a woman holding her only earthly possessions in a suitcase on her way to a concentration camp, riding on a train. This piece traveled the world and told this story in a myriad of countries. Long before the internet existed, this was a shared experience among us. But we shouldn't take away from math and science to marvel at the humanities, right? In 2014, my dad died pretty suddenly. He had a pretty massive heart attack, and that left my heart bleeding still to this day. And for the first time in my world, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do except come home from the road that I had been on for 20+ years. To come home to my nephews, come home to my sister, come home to my troubled relationship with my mother, and come home to my empty studio and create something with all of these objects that were my father's. Create a piece that helps me move through the grief and sound through the tears and collaborate on a piece called Home. And a moment of that looks like this. This deer head that hangs in the den of my house now was my dad's. He killed it. He slayed it. He slayed her. He slayed her when I was 3 years old, and she hung above the plaid couch in the family room, the one with the wooden arms, and she was a trophy, a prize, a proof of manliness, a proof of marksmanship. And suddenly, out of no fault of her own, she became a shrine. You see, friends, we humans are storytellers by nature. Our lives are stories unfolding in front of us. When we were kids, it was easy to imagine and dip freely in and out of play. Do you remember playing Cars? Do you remember playing house? I believe that along the way, we lost the ability to pretend and play because of life, liberty, and the pursuit of whatever. And cool. We lost because of cool. It became too cool to pretend. Well, I am here to offer to you that pretending is the coolest thing that you can do, and playing is the happiest place on earth. Imagination is vital. There are studies out there that believe that using our imagination our whole lives keeps our minds from slipping away when we are older. And yes, I know, it challenges us. It challenges us to our core. It challenges our beliefs, our core values. It makes us mad. It bores us to tears. And it makes us ask questions like, would you pee on Jesus? I would not be here today without my imagination, and neither would you. I mean, I want you to think about it. In the past few minutes we've had together, we've traveled from 5th grade to FANTASIA, from home to Holocaust. And this whole magic carpet ride started by pretending that we were talking to somebody who invited us to a production of Macbeth that we didn't want to go to in the first place. I have been blessed to live a creative life. And I fight now for others to get that opportunity. I give voice to people who are voiceless. I find funding for those who want to get their work off a page and put it on a stage, because this is the tie that binds us together, and it is important. I ask you tonight, I ask you to fight, to save a teacher's job who's going to take a kid to see their first Arthur Miller play. I ask you to donate money to organizations like the St Lou Fringe Festival, giving opportunity to new artists to make work. I beg you to call your elected officials and tell them not to defund the National Endowment for the Arts so that our artists of tomorrow can continue to be mentored by people like Jim Grummick and Leni Sack and challenged by the sacrilege of Andre Serrano. And I ask you to please support your local arts community, because it is for a wise and knowing people like yourselves. My name is Matthew Kerns, and I am a very proud performance artist, arts educator, and artistic curator. Arts matter, and I stand here before you as living proof. Thank you.